For most of us, when it comes to our romantic relationships, we are very self-focused. And even for everybody listening who, maybe you're somebody who's fawned a lot in your life and you're over-focused on everybody else, you're rescuing other people. That was certainly my case. I was still very self-focused in my relationships, not on purpose, because this is what humans do. Why? Because this is where the younger versions of us show up the most. But what this leads to is us focused on our own experience, our own needs, my enjoyment, my triggers, my pain that I'm feeling, my wants. And because those experiences can feel quite overwhelming, and very little might we find ourselves remembering that, oh my gosh, there's another human being here, and guess what? They also have needs and desires and fears and triggers. And so what happens is we both become very self-focused in the relational container, and that means that we have two very different agendas that actually have very little to do with the relationship itself. Welcome to You Make Sense. This podcast is a manual to understanding your human experience so that you can navigate the world with freedom, ease, empowerment, and create the life that you desire. Remember, you make sense, all parts, always. When it comes to our romantic relationships, of course, we all want them to be experiences where we feel joy and ease and fulfillment and aliveness and contentment and all of those wonderful, yummy things that we associate with a quote unquote good or healthy relationship. But where we've been told a lie is to think that that is just supposed to miraculously somehow happen, or we're going to meet this person that allows for that to happen, meaning they just fit perfectly as a puzzle piece into our experience, and somehow they are going to mend, without us doing anything, mend all of the things that aren't working in our own lives, and we're just going to feel extraordinary. It doesn't work that way. And you know what's really interesting? In other areas of our lives, we would never think that it was just supposed to be easy without effort or easy without work. Like, for example, if I wanted to become a triathlete, or maybe, even to a lesser degree, I never exercised and I wanted to get into shape, how would I do that? Through effort and work. And would that just be easy? Of course not. If I never worked out and I was like, you know what? I'm getting older. I'm losing muscle mass as it happens when we age. I think I need to start lifting weights and stuff because it's really good for, this is true. This is really good for us and it helps build bone density, all the things. So anyway, I decide I'm going to start exercising. Never really lifted weights much in my life. Would I expect that to just be easy? Of course not. It would feel uncomfortable because I'm not used to doing it. Maybe the only time a day I can do it is in the morning before work, and I don't really like getting up before work. So it's not going to feel comfortable. I'm going to want to sleep in. I'm not going to want to do the thing. I might complain about it. I might feel resistance to it. And then there'll be moments during it where it feels kind of good, and then it feels not so good, and then it feels kind of good, and then it feels not so good. And then I got up early and I did the thing, and I worked out with the trainer. I went to the class and I finished it, and I said, actually, that was awesome. I'm so glad I did that. But it came through diligence and showing up again and again and through effort. And guess what would happen with time? I would get the results that I wanted in my body. We know that that's the case when it comes to doing other things in our life, like working out as I named, like having the purpose that we desire. Nobody would ever think, like truly, that just I want to be a New York Times bestselling author. And then I sit on my couch. I never pick up my computer or a pen to write. And somehow there's just going to be a book on that list. How is that going to happen? It happens through the consistent showing up. It happens by doing the work. And that isn't just easy. And I just want to name that this is true for romantic partnership too. So because of the messaging that we've gotten, in our culture, in our world around relationships and movies and books, the messaging is generally that they're supposed to just sweep you off your feet and it's supposed to be filled with ease. And if it isn't, that means something is wrong. And that is so inherently untrue. In fact, romantic relationships are where so much of our growth and healing happen. And that means that they aren't just filled with ease. They're filled with work. When we can reorient towards that work, that's when the magic happens. That's when everything changes. It's sort of like when you get in the groove of working out and you're starting to notice shifts and you're like, I actually enjoy the work that goes into this because it's actually creating movement. I think that one of the reasons why couples find that they don't want to do the work a lot of the time is because they're not actually doing the work in the right way. Or perhaps not doing the work at all, even though we might think we are. And then what transpires is we feel hopeless, so why even try? And one of the reasons that this happens is because for most of us, when it comes to our romantic relationships, we are very self-focused. And even for everybody listening who, maybe you're somebody who's fond a lot in your life and you're over-focused on everybody else, you're rescuing other people. That was certainly my case. I was still very self-focused in my relationships, not on purpose, because this is what humans do. Why? Because this is where the younger versions of us show up the most, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But what this leads to is us focused on our own experience, our own needs, my enjoyment, my triggers, my pain that I'm feeling, my wants. And because those experiences can feel quite overwhelming, meaning they have a lot of charge to them, they can be quite engulfing. And very little might we find ourselves remembering that, oh my gosh, there's another human being here. And guess what? They also have needs and desires and fears and triggers. And so what happens is we both become very self-focused in the relational container. And that means that we have two very different agendas that actually have very little to do with the relationship itself. And so what is so important is that we must actually open the aperture of our experience to focus not just on what's happening internally for me, but also what's happening internally with my partner and what is needed or necessary in this relationship. Think of the relationship as its own entity. And each of our jobs is to come together and be a team to make this kind of like business thrive. And for anyone who's like, I'm a doer, that makes sense to me. I want us to remember relationships we want to focus on very differently than a business. But in many ways, it's like flourishing or growing a business. So how might I be different if I'm also focused on that, not just myself? And today we're going to talk about the ins and outs of how we actually do that. So first, I just want to name two very important ingredients that are necessary for a thriving relationship. Number one, that each person is focused on their own growth and are curious about their own experience. This is really vital. Now, usually what I find in relational coupleship is that one person is a little further ahead on that journey, or maybe even a lot further ahead on the journey than the other. I don't want you to think that that is wrong. All we need is that both people are willing. If you're listening to the podcast, you are likely the person that's a little further ahead, or maybe a lot further ahead. And what we need in our partner is willingness. If you are on your journey and they are not on their journey, that's going to actually create lots more distance relationally. And being on the journey doesn't mean they're doing it exactly like you, but they are open and they are willing. And willing doesn't mean excited. So if you're saying, yeah, my partner says they'll, go to this thing with me or they'll read this book, but they sort of like complain about it, but they still do it. That's still willing. What I will tell you is their complaining is likely them being scared. So that's willing and scared. Perfect. That's all we need for both people. And there are so many ways for self-exploration to occur. I don't want you to think that it has to be your way. There are many ways that we can find ourselves and learn more about ourselves and know ourselves. So I want you to be open to that your partner's way might be different than yours. And I'm laughing because often in relationships, it is different than yours. The second thing that is wildly important in terms of having a thriving relationship is that we are both feeding and fueling and tending the garden of our relationship. So I want you to think of a romantic relationship as a garden. We are both showing up to this piece of land, right? And it has beautiful possibility to it. The soil is filled with nutrients. It is a prime place for plants to grow. So it's really set up for success. And our job in the partnership is to come together and to look at one another and see the things that we each have that we bring to the table that is going to make this garden thrive and flourish. And we both support each other in using those gifts. And we can see where gardening is hard for each other. And instead of pointing out and say, you suck at this, we say, well, how can I help you in that process? Because we're a team focused on the garden. And when that occurs, we are celebrating as things grow in the garden. We are also able to see weeds that are arising, like things that aren't working. And we can say early on as the weed takes root, we got to get rid of that because it's going to, destroy all of the vegetation or the cucumbers or whatever else I'm growing. So let's make sure we tend to some of those weeds. And we're doing it together. And by the way, when the weeds come up, I don't say to my partner, well, that's your fault that the weeds are showing up. If you were just different, there wouldn't be a weed there. Because I'm not focused on self or poking at them. I'm focused on the garden. I hope this metaphor is making sense to you. That weed is a thing that might not be working for you. Like, this particular area of the relationship is challenging when you avoid stuff. That's a weed. But I'm not going to blame that on you. I'm going to say, avoidance in a relationship doesn't allow for broccoli to sprout. So you know what? Let's work on taking that weed out. And you know what? That weed that you have been resourcing, you've been resourcing since you were 2 years old for very good reason. So I'm not blaming you for that. And I'm not even looking for the weed to be gone today. I'm just saying, yes, let's do that together because we are a team intending the garden. And when couples are able to do this, and I'm not a farmer, but anyone that I've talked to that is a farmer, it sounds like a hard job. Like, that's not an easy thing. You're not just kicking back all day long. You are working and working hard. And the fruits of your labor are so extraordinary, but there's work involved in it. And that is what healthy relationship is like. And the more we can demystify this and we can actually talk about what's necessary to have a healthy relationship, the more there's a pathway towards it. And today we're going to talk about some of those steps that are necessary to come together in this garden and transform it. And I just want to name, if you've been in a relationship for a long time and there's grief around like, oh my gosh, at the beginning, we showed up at the garden and we were planning. And you're both saying like, oh my gosh, isn't it going to be great? We're going to have plum trees over there. And then we're going to have apricot trees over there. And then we're going to have, snap peas. I always want snap peas. We'll have them over there. It's going to be so amazing. It's going to be the best garden. But nobody taught you how to do relationships. So you know what happened for both of you? That weeds started to come in. And neither of you were actually showing up to tend the garden. And so what occurred is all the weeds overgrew the garden and it wasn't getting watered. And all of a sudden you come back and you're both looking at it and you're saying, oh no, what happened? Oh, this isn't right. They're not right. This can't work. And that is so untrue. If you have two willing people who are willing to say, come back and say, all right, well, let's get to work together. Any garden can be transformed if both people are willing. That's all we need, both people willing. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how we begin to do that. But first, I want to talk about how we end up in this place where we're looking at the garden and all of that possibility is nowhere to be found. And it seems overwhelming and impossible. And that is because we haven't been spending our time tending that garden or even looking at it or even imagining what it could be. We find ourselves on a battleground next to the garden. And that is where we have predominantly been spending our time. And this is what occurs when we come into romantic relationship. So at the very beginning, what happens? We show up and we are at the precipice of this piece of land and we're both looking at it like, wow, this is so amazing. This is the early stages of dating, okay? And we meet this person and we're like, wow, they're going to be so great to garden with. This is going to be fantastic. I can't wait. And we're both so eager and we're excited and we're actually focusing on who our partner is. We're like, they're going to be a great partner. This is fabulous stuff. So that's how we begin. We are really relationally focused at the beginning. And why is that? Because at the beginning of a relationship, our nervous system is usually not yet seeing our partner as any source of pain or danger. Why? Because they're new to us, they are not known, they're a stranger in many ways. And what happens over time is that that person who is more of a stranger and an acquaintance and then, a close person, with time and proximity, they start to become our person. They start to become like family to us. They are the person we go to for intimacy and love and vulnerability and all the things. So here's the deal. Your autonomic nervous system that lives in your body, it is your self-protective mechanism. And you have this threat detector inside of it called neuroception. Its job is to look around your life every millisecond. There's 1,000 milliseconds in a second, so very fast, to see if you're safe or not in your current situation. Now, to decide what's going on in your current life, it looks to an internal database that has every lived experience you've ever had inside of it to decide. Guess what? In your database, you have all your earliest childhood experiences. Those are your first experience of intimate relationship, your first experiences of home, your first experiences of connection. So the closer you get to your partner, the more your threat detector is going to say, okay, they're not just a new person anymore. They are my home, my person, my place I go to for all these things, right? And it looks to the database and it says, what intel or information do we have on love, on belonging, on home? And whatever you experienced in your childhood, that is what it's going to project onto your partner. So if home wasn't safe, guess what? All of a sudden, it's going to see your partner is not safe. If your parents or your caregivers were sometimes loving and sometimes not, it's going to think your partner's the same. It's projecting your past onto them. And all of a sudden, I'm not in this possibility of what a garden can be. I'm literally in my childhood home with them. And even if you had a loving childhood, nobody did it exactly right in terms of your caregivers. So instead of being in that garden, I'm in what I'm calling the battlefield. And what is really going to be highlighted here are all the potholes and the landmines that are unresolved wounds from my childhood experience, because I am projecting that now onto my partner. And you know what is super duper cool about how our nervous system works? When you met your partner, that very first meeting of them, neuroception already knew that this would occur, because neuroception is picking up on the most subtle subconscious cues. And what human beings do is we draw in people, romantic partners, who emulate a combination of the good things that your caregivers gave you and also the things they couldn't give you or didn't give you. Now, the goal is, the more work we've done, that it's a healthier version of that. But I just want you to know, to expect that the right person for you is going to do that. This is a natural, normal part of the process. There's an incredible, wise couples therapist named Terry Real. Definitely check out his work. And he often says that we marry our unfinished business, or we get into relationship with our unfinished business. So we are most drawn to people who shine a light on our core wounding that is asked to be resolved. Our romantic relationships are invitations into the last bits of unresolved wounding that we have. And what I want you to know is that you can do so much work in friendship, in therapeutic containers with yourself. I had done that. So much work. But there is a portion of this work, this last bit of the wounding, that needs to get resolved in a container that emulates the type of container we are wounded in. What is necessary is that we have to be in the state-dependent memory or the embodied experience, a flavoring of what that's like, in order for it to be resolved. And the thing that is going to emulate your childhood the most is a romantic relationship. So this is a gift. This is a gift when that happens. I want you to think about, if you're partnered or maybe even a last partnership, I want you to think about how your partner fits perfectly into your unresolved wounding. Really, truly, this is how it works. And so they're not going to be usually exactly like your caregiver. but is there a flavoring of it? So let's say that you were parentified as a child, you were made responsible for your mom or dad's feelings and their experience. You had to caretake them. And now you're in a partnership with somebody who isn't asking you to caretake them fully, but they are struggling in their own way with dysregulation in their nervous system. They feel anxious all the time. And part of our work in that experience is to be able to, via this relationship, to say, I'm not going to follow the impulse of rescuing. And instead, I am going to really be healthily boundaried in this. There's obviously a lot of complexity to how we do this. But the point is that the thing I was never able to do when I was young, I'm going to do now, which is love you dearly and fully and be there to support you, but I'm not going to rescue you. And that, by the way, is what your partner needs. Because if you rescue them, you are keeping them from their own agency and power. And through this experience, they get to heal because I'm loving them and turning towards them, and I get to heal the past. By the way, you fit perfectly into your partner's puzzle too. And that, when we talk about like true love or what is a right type of love, it's that. It is two people willing to do the work, two people who are safe, two people who are imperfect, and two people who shine a light on those wounds who haven't been resolved. And when that occurs, oh my goodness, the garden that is possible is beyond your wildest dreams. If you find yourself struggling in any area of your life, maybe that's in your purpose, your relationships, feeling good in your body, or stepping towards the life you're here to live, I want you to know there are things that we can do to change this. And I also want you to know everything I just mentioned has a commonality to it. The system responsible for the majority of our stuckness in all of those areas and more is called our autonomic nervous system. And I'm hosting a free 2-day live online event called Unlock the Life You Desire, where I'm going to equip you with tangible, somatic, therapeutic tools that will support you to get unstuck and step into the life that you are here to live. Each call will be an hour and a half long and will be comprised of a teaching component and a Q&A session. Throughout our time together, each day is going to be broken up into specific, tangible tools that are necessary to support you to experience life with greater ease, fullness, aliveness, so that you can live the full life you are here to live. Each day will be a different topic to support you to live your life with more freedom, ease, and empowerment. And if you can't be there live, make sure to still RSVP because there'll be a limited time replay emailed to you. Check the show notes to join. So the next thing that we have to do is to take the relationship off the battlefield and bring it into the garden. And this is where parts work come in. I approach parts work from an internal family systems model. We all have different versions of ourselves that live inside of us. We particularly have vulnerable parts that are young. They experienced our core woundings. And then we have protective parts who ensure the vulnerable parts never feel the pain of the past. And we have our adult self. Now, guess what? In your romantic relationships, this is where your younger parts show up the most. Why? Because they are being reminded of what it was like to be with their caregivers. And so this threat detector that we have is looking out into the relationship. And you know what they're saying? How are you going to be like my parents? How are you going to hurt me like they did? How are you going to let me down like they did? And it's almost like we're hyper vigilant to that. So let's say that you in your childhood, you had a caregiver who, when you had a big emotion, they shut it down. And they even maybe withheld love from you. So they left, they threatened you. So they didn't meet you in your experience at all. And it was very unsafe. Now, let's say you have a partner. Here's the flavoring, right? Who is not like that at all. They are deep feelers. They have capacity to really explore what's inside of themselves, but they don't yet have capacity to express it because nobody did that with them when they were little. So as you come to them with something or like an emotion, you're feeling sadness or you're feeling disappointment and you share it with them, they feel it. And then their nervous system shuts them down because it's too much to open to another person this way because I never learned how to do it. And they do not leave and run away. They don't threaten you, but they shut down in that moment. And you ask them, well, what are you feeling about what I'm saying? And you notice they're inhibited, like they just can't seem to open. Guess what's occurring in that moment? Your younger part will get triggered and will say, whoa, you're just like my caregivers because you're shutting down. But can you see how they're very different from your caregivers? but your younger part will show up in your body. So now I'm not adult me seeing my partner. I can't even see what's happening clearly and be able to acknowledge, here's the truth, by the way. If you don't have the capacity to just open, it is literally impossible to expect another person who never learned how to do that to, in that moment, just totally open to you and express everything they're feeling. It can't work that way. It's like the metaphor I use or analogy I use when, if I've been in a dark room and I try to look at sunlight, I cannot keep my eyes open. The same is true for your partner. If you're actually in your adult self, you'll be able to see that. And then I don't take that on personally. And I can also see how they're trying. But what usually happens is it triggers young me. And now I am not with my partner. I am on the battlefield. I am back in that childhood home. And guess what I then do? I maybe shut down too. And I become icy and disconnect and maybe passive aggressive. And guess what their system sees? They see their caregiver who made them feel like they were inherently bad. They could never get anything right. And now their system is also in the battlefield. And we aren't relational in this moment. We are both feeling exquisite pain of the past, and we aren't in our relationship. We are in our childhood homes. We are in the pain that we experienced. This is what happens to everybody in relationships, but we don't know what's happening. So we think it's all about today. Isn't it a lot to put on our partner, all the things our parents didn't get right? Think about that for a sec. I actually just thought about that relationally for myself. So I just said that out loud. Like, think about that. Think of all the things your caregivers didn't get right. And most of you listening, or many of you, had caregivers who were very loving and wonderful, but they didn't get everything right. And they could have got a lot more right. And some of you had childhoods like mine. You know what we're doing on that battlefield? We are punishing our partner for everything our caregivers got wrong. And our partner wasn't there for any of it. And by the way, you know what they're doing to you? Exactly the same thing. But we don't know we're doing it. And so the way off the battlefield and into the garden is that we each on our own have to get to know these parts of ourselves. And we have to begin reparenting them. When you reparent them, what you're doing is you're taking their hand and saying, oh, my love, I know this person seems like the past, but they aren't. They're really different. Let me show you how they're different, and let me meet your need. So when you meet the younger part's need, you are beginning to give them a new childhood experience. That's part of our work. And when we do that, it takes them off the battlefield. But the thing we can't do is expect our partner to rescue those parts. It's not their job, nor can they ever do it. The only person that can rescue your parts is you. Now, along this way, in getting off of the battlefield and coming into the garden, another very important component of how we do this is you have to start becoming aware of your partner's parts. This is an extraordinary way to build empathy and compassion. Because what do we tend to do? We just poke the finger and say, you're doing that wrong. Why do you do that? And so on and so forth. Instead of understanding, if your partner's triggered, they're scared. If you're triggered, you're scared. Scared and hurting. That's what's actually occurring. So what I want you to do is really get to know, either through a conversation with them, or you might already know this. What is your partner's core wounding? Were they made to feel like they weren't enough? Were they made to feel like they were bad? Did they have to be all alone with their emotions and no one taught them how to feel? Were they made to feel like they had to earn love? Were they hurt or harmed in some particular way? Were they bullied? Were they hyper-criticized? You get the idea. What happened to them? And then I want you to think about what protectors showed up to protect that younger part. Maybe they avoid. Maybe they get angry. Maybe they deflect. Maybe they really struggle. This is common. Maybe they really struggle to say, I'm sorry. And they just can't get the words out. And so what does that do for you? You're like the gaslighting narcissist I grew up with. But the truth is they may be very different than that. It might be that saying I'm sorry is so hard because they have such deep shame of feeling like when they were imperfect, they were unloved and bad. And so the protector's like, don't say it because then you're going to have to feel that again. They're going to shame you or hurt you. And so what we want to look at is, can I see the vulnerable part in the protector? This isn't to excuse behavior, but allow you to see, how is their adult self trying? Now, the example of they can't say I'm sorry, what they might do is hug you and say, I love you so much. I don't want you to ever feel bad. But the words I'm sorry don't come out. But can you see how that's their way of doing it for now? That is them coming online and wanting to meet your needs. So the more that you can see what's actually going on under the surface, just like you have compassion for yourself, the more all of you, both adults and all your parts, are ushered over into the garden where the work can actually happen. Now, before we get into how to do that work, I just want to name that where your partner is inhibited is likely what you never got, and vice versa. Whatever is hard for them is something you need. Whatever is hard for you is something they need. Isn't that annoying? I say that because I told you romantic relationships are work, yeah? It's a beautiful way that the universe has orchestrated us coming into our wholeness. Romantic relationships are supposed to be an invitation into our wholeness. And by the way, this is why we're most attracted to people who emulate these things for us, because it's a place where wholeness can happen, a place where we can come into our fullness of being. And so what is the work? The work is that, remember I said we just need two willing people. So something that was inhibited for me was play, because I never got to play as a kid. Even though when I am with people I don't really know, play is super easy because there's nothing to risk, and play with like my pets, super easy. But when it came to romantic partnership, play was really inhibited and hard because play wasn't allowed in my home. See how that battlefield works? And what did I usually attract? Very playful partners. Basically, always very playful partners. Can you see the invitation? They're holding up a mirror for me of what I wanted desperately to come into. And what did they need in a relationship? Lots of play. Can you see how that fits perfect? And what did I often draw in terms of romantic partners? I am really good at emotionally excavating, because I do this for a living, and I'm very good at verbally communicating intimately. It is something that I need very much in relationships. So guess what I attracted? People who struggled with that. Why? Because I grew up with a lot of neglect. And so my work was their inhibited ability to verbally communicate triggered these younger parts that I needed to work with on a deeper level. If they didn't trigger that, I wouldn't be able to work with it. And the other thing is, remember, willing. All I needed was somebody who was willing and afraid. And my deep need for it helped them. Can you see how this all works? So when we have that, we come into the garden together. If we can orient out of the battlefield and come into the garden, we actually see difference in a positive way. And all that we're doing when we get to the garden is saying, oh, here's this seed that I would like to plant. It's like our partner might be saying that. Here's this seed, Sarah. I really connect with intimacy, with play. It's super important to me. So I would like us to plant the seed. And my system's like, oh God, I have to go towards it. It feels so scary. And I'm asking them to plant the seed, right? But when you plant a seed, what are we doing when we plant a seed? We don't rush that process. We slowly allow the process of its unfolding to occur. Do you think it would help if you spent all of your energy looking at the seed and saying, I don't know why you're not moving along faster. You really should move along faster. First of all, it'd be a waste of your energy. It wouldn't help anything. And when we do that in a relationship, it actually deters things. We're going to talk more about that in a moment. But what's really important to understand is that the very best thing that we can do in this garden when the seed is planted is actually celebrate the unfolding of it and not expect that it's going to transform overnight. That is not possible. Can't happen. And the more that I am able from adult me to see that seed that is being planted, to see it take form and roots to occur, oh my gosh, and the more that you celebrate that, because here's the deal, that is your partner loving you. Them leaning into their scary stuff that they have avoided their whole life, or that they are being reminded of, the most painful stuff in the past. When you are able to say, oh my gosh, I just saw you stretch into something that is so uncomfortable. I'm going to go back to an example with me being a emotional intelligence and verbally processing. If I have a partner who is so overwhelmed by that because they never learned how to do it, and it feels like way big exposure, and they shut down 90%, maybe it used to be 100, they shut down 90%, and they have tears in their eyes and they're able to communicate like 2 sentences to me, that is a stretch. That is them going into sunlight after being in the dark and opening their eyes, and it gives you a headache and it feels like a lot, but they did it. That is stretching. This is how we change. And if someone stretches for you, that is what I believe in doing this work for a long time and relational work. I think that's the highest form of love. Truly, it's easy to do the things that are easy for someone else. It is hard to do the things that are terrifying. And think about how hard it is for you to stretch into new things. That's not easy. And if someone's doing it for you, my goodness, that is love. So the more that you can orient towards that, can you see how healing that is for the other person? And vice versa. If I was leaning into play, which felt uncomfortable, scary, and my partner was criticizing the way I was doing it and saying, I didn't have that much fun with you because you were so stiff and not really playful, and other people are so much more playful than you. Do you think I'd ever want to play again? No way. But if they welcomed me and they said, oh, you're doing it exactly right. Thank you. Can you see how that would make me want to do it more? This, my friends, is being relationally focused and what we must do. Okay, a couple more things that we want to focus on relationally is honoring difference. Now, this is really vital and key. You're not going to be attracted to your doppelganger. Think about that for a second. I really actually want you to think about this. What would it be like to be in a relationship with you? When I think about that, of course, there are things about me that I would really enjoy being in a relationship with. But you know what? There's other things about me that I really actually wouldn't enjoy at all and would find very annoying. So I think this can be a very important reflection and really acknowledging our own humanness. This supports us to be more relational. And then really leaning into a part of what builds polarity in attraction is difference. It's very common that we have one person who is super on time and the other person is never on time. It's just a way that difference occurs. There's a polarity there. I'm just giving you a simple, pretty benign example, but there's going to be difference. And what we want to think about is, what are things in the garden that I need? It's like core wounding that I need your help to resolve. Those are the non-negotiable things, but we want to honor the pace of that seed sprouting. There are other differences that we want to see if we can actually celebrate instead of picking apart. And I want you to think about the difference between you and your partner is, how can you see the positivity in that difference? So really begin to explore it. What does it invite you into? Maybe it invites you into more patience. Maybe it invites you into curiosity about yourself. Maybe it invites you into a different way of thinking. And the more that you can love them as they are instead of trying to transform them into this, perfect version of what you think you want, the more happiness there is relationally in the experience. And by the way, if you form them into this perfect thing you want, you wouldn't love them as much. You love them also because of their difference. So really seeing, can I begin to value difference? And as I already talked about, this next point is absolutely vital and key, is honoring and celebrating their stretching. Just as I want you to honor and celebrate your stretch. Think about this for a moment. Anything that you've changed, working with your parts, regulating your nervous system, making adaptations and healing and shifts occurring in your life, remember how hard that is? It is so freaking hard. So if your partner is doing that, they're getting the benefit because they're growing, but what is their motivator? You are their motivator because you've asked for it. And so they are going towards their scariest thing for you because they love you. And please be with the experience of somebody is loving me that much that they are willing to do that imperfectly. They got it 9% wrong and 10% right. Oh my gosh, I'm so loved. If you want them to change, meaning heal more, guess what? Orient that way because it makes you then want to do more. If you keep poking a finger at them, they're bad, what do you think it's going to make them want to do? Not open. Just as it wouldn't make you want to. So we really want to both do that, and that is making us more relationally focused. The next thing I want you to look at is, how are they loving you in different ways than perhaps you've asked to be loved that you aren't seeing? our partners are going to be showing us love in lots of different ways. And usually the place they're most inhibited is the way we want to be loved. But they'll be doing all these other things. And because those are more comfortable ways for them to show love. So what I want you to do is begin taking in, how are they trying to show me they love me? That I'm deflecting, and vice versa. This makes us more relationally focused, and no longer are we on that battlefield projecting our childhood onto them. I am actually in this garden with their adult self and with adult me, and I can actually see what is happening in front of me instead of projecting the past onto them. So, my friends, I hope this is making sense of romantic relationship for you. I hope that there are people listening who have been on the battlefield and think, oh, it's not possible for me. And every relationship I end on the battlefield, and maybe I can never get into a relationship again if I'm single. Oh my goodness, this is what's possible when you have two people that are willing. That's all you need. And so the next person, if you're single, the next person that you are with, one of the most important things to find out is, are they willing? And if so, this is what can happen. And if you are in a romantic relationship where you've been on the battlefield and you look over at this garden and you're like, oh my gosh, it is not doing well. There is overgrowth and weeds everywhere. Well, any garden can be cleaned up. Yeah, it takes effort and it takes work, but it's possible. And if you're in a relationship with a garden that is thriving, the way that you made it thrive is by tending it. And we always have to tend the garden, but it stops becoming hard work like it is being on the battlefield, and it becomes rewarding work. And it heals the past in the process. Science confirms that it's not possible to have a full, happy, fulfilling life unless we are predominantly experiencing it from regulation. Your nervous system has the power to either keep you stuck living a smaller life than you feel called to, or to unlock the life you are here to live so that you can step into the fullness that you are here for and feel better in your body in the process. This work not only supports us to embody our purpose, it supports us to have the relationships we desire, to live the fully expressed version of life that we are here for. Navigating Your Nervous System is a 6-week online program I created to support you to harness the power of your nervous system so that you can be in the driver's seat of your life and heal the past in the process. Over the course of 6 weeks, I'm going to give you tangible somatic therapeutic tools to get into the driver's seat of this system so that you can step towards the life that you desire and so deeply deserve. The program is now open for enrollment. You can check the show notes to join and learn more. All right, we're going to get to the Q&A portion of this episode. We have Rachel back here with us today. I just want to say, if you have any questions that you'd like to submit for us, we would love to receive them and answer them on the podcast. Not only will it help you, but it will help other people who likely have similar questions too. So we've linked out in the show notes how to submit a video or audio question. And Rachel, it is good to see you here again today. Thanks for being here with me.
Oh, hi. It's lovely to be here. Yeah. And the questions people send in, I hear them a lot, so I know how helpful they are for everyone. Yeah. So this first question. Hello. I would like help differentiating between anxiety and our truth, particularly in romantic relationships. I have a pattern of ruminating and not being able to decide whether I want to stay and move forward or end it. Paralyzed to break up or move forward together, staying in limbo. Is this a byproduct of trauma?
Oh my goodness. So I'm saying, oh my goodness, because I relate to this very much. And I know so many people do too. And I just want to name, I know we've talked about this in other episodes as well, but it is vitally important that we understand our parts, our vulnerable parts, our protective parts, and our adult self, and what each feels like in our body and in our system. Because if you have had relational trauma, developmental trauma that occurred early in your life, then your nervous system is going to superimpose that onto any partnership you are in. And what that also means is when you begin to receive good things relationally, your nervous system is going to feel overwhelmed by that or afraid of it. And so that essentially means the good won't feel good at first. Very normal. But if we just respond to every feeling as if it's the truth to what is in front of us today, we are going to be leading ourselves in the wrong direction. And the other thing that I want to say is that this doesn't, of course, let off the hook something that isn't working in a relationship. And by the way, every relationship has things that aren't working. I think I want to just normalize that for a second. And the Gottmans, who have done lots of relational work and relational studies, talk so much about a lot of relational difference can actually never be resolved. Some things won't be resolved. It's how we orient to them. So if we're waiting to get to a place where we think there's going to be no things that are different or no issue, that won't ever happen. Of course, the goal is that we are able to bring resolution to, and like we talked about in this episode, and a lot of healing to what's happening relationally. But that sometimes that different stuff, like my partner can go on tangents and they just talk about something for 40 minutes and they don't realize that I'm not really interested in hearing about that anymore. And that's a thing my partner does. That might be a thing your partner does forever. And that's what I mean by relational difference. And if we try to mold another human into being exactly what we want, likely, number one, they're going to resist that. No, it'll cause more issue. And number two, you probably wouldn't be as attracted to them if you molded them into something else. And so our work is, how can I actually see the goodness in the difference? That's what I mean by that. Hopefully that makes sense. While simultaneously working on what doesn't really work and what we need more of. Now, what I will say is when it comes to something like that example I just gave, if you have a trauma history, because that's a misattunement, right? What's happening is, and a lot of people have partners like that where they, I don't know if you follow astrology at all, but there may be certain signs of personalities where somebody just loves to talk about things, and you give them one subject, and if they're passionate about it, they'll talk about it for an hour. And you're with them or you're at a dinner and you're like, oh my gosh, they're going on and on. They can't read the room, or they don't see that I don't want to hear about it. That's a misattunement. And if we don't have trauma being projected on that, we're going to see it as, at first, maybe like that's annoying. And hopefully eventually getting to, this is my partner being excited about something. And the way they're excited about things is different than me. And that's okay. But if you have a trauma history and you are chronically misattuned with, you know what might happen in that scenario? When you have disengaged, like you're trying to give a message that you're feeling misattuned with, and so you look down at your food and your partner's not reading it. They're just continuing to go on. It's going to trigger a part of you that experienced the neglect you felt in you had in your childhood. And I'm not going to be responding to this present moment. And what will happen? A protector will show up because they're being reminded of the neglect, and their job is to get you away from feeling neglect. And so they're going to say things to you in your mind like, this person's not the right person for you. See, look at this. There's other people in the world who wouldn't be doing this, and they'd be so attuned with you, and they would, you'd have so much in common that you would only talk about things that are of interest to you, and you wouldn't have to hear about things that you really don't care about at all. And clearly this is a sign this is wrong. You know it's wrong. So you got to get out of here. And that's why you're feeling this in your gut. Did you see that thing on Instagram yesterday? Do you remember when they said you don't ignore the signals happening inside of you? This is a signal happening inside of you, and you better listen to it right now, or you're going to be in the wrong thing forever. And by the way, you're running out of time. And think about it. Your age right now, if you want to have kids, you don't have that many years left to be able to do that. So you better really sort. And I know, by the way, I'm going to stop because I know there's people listening that are like, how did she know what was happening in my mind? Because this is what occurs. This is exactly how your protective parts occur. The story might be slightly different, but this is what's occurring. Was what I'm saying making sense, Rach? I just want to be sure as I'm going through. I was about to say to the camera again, does that make sense? But since we have Rachel here, she can help validate for me whether or not it does, to make sure that everyone's following it, because this is such a common thing that so many of us experience if we've had any kind of developmental trauma. And what we don't understand is it's not all about the person in front of us. I think I want everybody to write that down. It is not all about the person in front of you, just as whatever they're feeling is not all about you. And especially if the feeling is quite strong, and something pretty egregious did not happen, it's very much likely not all about what they're doing or not doing. I also just want to name that a lot of us have this protective part whose job is to ensure you never step into the relationship. I had this protective part. It's the 1 foot in, 1 foot out. They are so intelligent. And what this part knows is this, I'll just speak from my own part. What she said to me at one point was, when I connected to this protective part said, I know exactly what's going to happen. If we allow things to never be great, what will happen is it will slowly erode. It's like a slow poison. And then I know what occurs. It ends. And they will leave. But I will have control over it happening. And by the time that they leave, there'll be enough callousness around each of our hearts that it won't hurt that bad. And this is such a more comfortable way for me to navigate things because I know it's going to happen. It won't hurt as bad. And I'm used to being in low-grade suffering all the time. I am orchestrating this. That's what that part told me. And I was like, wow, that's exactly what was happening. And then what I did was I took time and I connected into what is my vulnerable part? That's the part that protector is protecting, the 1 foot in, 1 foot out. What is the vulnerable part afraid might happen if things are really good? What is she afraid might happen if I fully lean into or step into this? And by the way, you're going to tell yourself, I'm not afraid of things being good. I want it to be good. I want it to be amazing. Adult you does. But I don't know about that vulnerable part. So we have to check in with that vulnerable part and find out. And when I checked in with my vulnerable part, I remember I was, I connect to my parts a lot in writing. And I was writing and that vulnerable part said, when I asked like, what is she afraid might happen if it's wonderful? And she said that she's terrified that it will mean she's trapped in a family again forever because family was so dangerous. I don't want that to happen. She was terrified that if she was loved, someone would try to own her. She doesn't want to have that experience again because that was so dangerous. She was terrified of joy because she was worried that would make her feel out of control. If those parts, those vulnerable parts feel that and you don't listen to them, do you know who listens to them? The protector. And the protector's like, don't worry if this mother of yours isn't listening very well. I'm meaning the mother, me. I'm listening and I'm going to make sure I keep you from those things. And so this is all to see how it's so cool what's happening inside of each of us. Do you see how intricate we are? Like, isn't it wild, Rach, how nothing, truly nothing as is what it seems on the surface. There is a multitude of levels underneath it. And if you don't understand this, we stay in things we shouldn't. We leave things we shouldn't. Not shouldn't, but that aren't connected to our truest, deepest desires and our truth. And as I've talked about so much, this work can feel counterintuitive at first because the thing you desire most likely has flavorings of stuff that was dangerous or inhibited in the past. So if I want family, probably family wasn't fully safe in the past or didn't feel good. If I want greater intimacy, that's something that probably wasn't safe or didn't feel good or was unavailable. And so it will feel counterintuitive. So that's the work we must do. Number 2 on this, I want this person to anchor in your truest you, truest self and IFS terms, but your highest form of regulation. Go do something when you're really regulated. And from that place, don't have your partner around. Tell them to get lost. Just kidding. Don't tell them to get lost, but just go do something when they're not there because your nervous system will be more apt to let you feel the truth about them when you're not around them. And then once you're in a solo space of regulation, please ask yourself, what do I love about this person? And let truth arise in your body. And then I want you to ask yourself, what isn't working? Don't be afraid to know what isn't working. There are things that aren't working. I'm going to just name this. There are things that aren't working in my relationship. That's if someone tells you there is something that's not fully working in their relationship, that's like saying, I'm a perfect person. It's not possible. The goal, when I say isn't working, it's, how can we grow together more? Or I'm noticing there's this thing I need more of, or there's this thing I need less of. That's what growth is. If you say it's a perfect relationship, it's a perfect person, I'm a perfect person, we are certainly taking away the truth of our humanity and the truth of relational dynamics. So please let yourself know what isn't working. What do I need more of? What do I need different? Be with truth around that. What is a deal breaker thing for me? Meaning like, yeah, I can feel in my body that this is an area that I need us to grow in. And then I want you to ask yourself in your body, what is something that is perfectly imperfect about my partner that I can see the goodness in? And if I am not in a trauma response, how can I view that? You know how I gave that example of a partner who just goes on and on about anything? They're like, want to tell you about screwdrivers for 45 minutes or about, like the lipstick that they bought. And you're like, I just really don't care about that at all. But I love you. So what are the things I can live with? And from adult you'll be able to know. from this place that'll tell you what truth is today. Don't ask yourself, what am I supposed to do next year? Just today, what is truth? And then we take our right next step. But I lastly just want to name, if you're in that heady space, is this right for me? Is this wrong for me? You are not in the relationship. You are in a protective part that's keeping you outside of it. And if you're 1 foot in, 1 foot out, the truth of the matter is that can't work.
That is such a powerful answer, Sarah. Thank you so much. I'm going to be doing some of that after we finish filming today. My partner's just gone away, so I'm going to be implementing that because he was annoying me quite a lot this week. So thank you.
And thank you for saying that, Rachel. I'm so glad you allow for your humanness here, because it's such a gift for everybody. Rachel's in a loving partnership. She's been with her partner for a really long time. And she just said something. He's been really annoying me. And, when our partner's annoying us and we have a protective part shows up, we say a lot of not so great things in our head, right? And, the goal is that we're not saying that out loud, but let's normalize that we're saying all kinds of stuff to ourselves about them that's not so great. We're blowing up the relationship itself. We're just, and this is what it's like to be human. This is what it's like to be in relationship. And that doesn't mean a relationship isn't right for us. So thanks for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. So this next person is desiring a relationship. Hi, Sarah. Thank you for your fantastic work. My question is in relation to wanting something I don't have. I really want to be in a relationship, but currently I am not in a relationship and haven't been for several years. Sometimes I desire to be held, listened to, and experience intimacy so much that my system feels overwhelmed with the sensation. Or I feel myself getting overwhelmingly sad and angry. What can I do in this situation? Do you have any somatic tools to help deal with the desire and the accompanying emotions? As I haven't had a relationship in a few years, I feel as if the anger and disappointment is growing. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. No, I'm not positive about this, but I'm just being curious about what they said in terms of that deep desire for connection and intimacy and longing. And if it feels insatiable, that's a clue that it's not just adult us wanting that partnership, that there's also a young one inside of us that is saying, I am starving. I am starving for love and connection and touch and safety and adoration and tenderness. And what needs to occur is that we turn towards that young part and we pick them up and say, oh, my love, I'm right here. And we become that for the young part of ourselves. And so I really want this person to think about that, get connected into whose sadness and longing is it? It's definitely a part of its adult you, but can you get curious? Is it also a different part of me's experience? And please be with that part who likely did not fully get their needs met, at some point in time in their life. The more that I do that internally, the more that that part is getting their needs met, and that insatiable desire changes to just being my adult self's desire. And then what we must do from regulation, so once we tend our parts, from regulation, we have the capacity to be with uncomfortability. And we have to make space to be in longing and allow for longing to move through our body. There's a grief in this, and grief is very important to process so it can make room for what's possible. Your protective parts, or our protective parts, won't allow us to open to love again if they think that we can't hold the aftermath of losing love. Our protective parts won't be open to letting us love again if they don't think that we can hold the aftermath of losing love. I repeated that on purpose because it is so important for everyone listening to understand. The protective parts, if you are watching, and if we can't tend to the younger parts in the aftermath of losing love or in loneliness, I know it's been a couple of years for this person, but if our protective parts think we can't handle that, they're not going to allow us to come into another romantic relationship because they're like, no way, because I know what happens when you lose it. We get so overwhelmed by it, we shut down, we feel like we can't survive it. No way, I'm not letting you do that again. Even if it's like, whatever, 2 years, 2 months, 5 years of connection and goodness, no, because the other side is too much. So what we have to do is to be with that longing. Longing is a clue of your soul's desires. And by the way, if someone's like, easy for you to say, oh my gosh, I was in longing around this particular thing for 8 years, a long time, in a not too distant past. And I was in longing around purpose for decades and longing around community for decades and all the things. Longing has a beautiful quality to it in that when you're in longing, you're allowing yourself to be present to the miracle of what is possible. If anyone here has ever gardened, like you're planting vegetables and fruit, the process is what's enjoyable. Put it in the soil and I'm like, oh, I can't wait for these tomatoes to come. And you look at it every day and they're not there yet. But because you know the tomatoes are arriving, it allows for it to be joyful. If you did not believe the tomatoes were going to arrive, it would be quite stressful. And so our goal is to feel into the truth that if it's a desire of your soul, that it's possible. It always looks different than we think, but it's possible and it's meant to be. And from that place, it shifts our experience of longing. And then from that place, we really want to feel into what is it that I desire? And the curiosity of, I wonder when it'll arrive. Everybody that I know who approaches dating from this place, by the way, finds someone like that. Or if it's not like that, the process is like that because they're in joy during it. The people that are not doing that are coming from fear and dysregulation. It is an arduous, exhausting process. They're like, I keep meeting terrible people on dating apps. It's not possible for me. The people who say, I was just with a close friend of mine recently, and she was like, there's no right or wrong, of course, but she was like, I don't like dating apps. I don't want to be on them. She has a young son and was like, I'm just not doing that. And by the way, she works from home. So a lot of people were saying to her, how do you expect you're going to meet anybody? You're not going anywhere. And she said, I don't care. That's not how I'm doing it because that's not how I'm supposed to do it. I'm doing it the way that I am, which is supposed to be in joy and aliveness, and it will arrive when it's supposed to. And lo and behold, somebody that she knows that, does some bodywork stuff, knew somebody and said, I think you should meet this person, just like a web. And all of a sudden she met this person without the effort. And this goes beyond dating. This is true in every area of our life, but we have to really feel into if it's a desire of my soul, it's meant for me, just like the vegetables sprouting out of the earth.
And what you've shared around how to tend to the loneliness and the longing, I think really resonates with this next question as well. I understand that relationships and community are a key role in healing. Through my healing journey, I have become more isolated and withdrawn from connections. Part of me is longing for connection. When it comes to actually connecting and socializing in real life, it feels so triggering, something I really avoid. It's as though I want to have fun and engage, but I avoid the opportunity. And in the experience, I want to escape and be at home.
The things that we desire the most are usually things that were dangerous or inhibited in the past. Trauma, for the most part, is relational, meaning it happens with another human or living being. And that doesn't mean that they were there. They may have been neglectful, but it involved a living being. So what usually occurs is, the result of that is our nervous system says, well, in this way, humans aren't safe. So some people who have, less severe trauma, and their system might say, in most ways, humans are safe. But the way they aren't safe is when you have a big emotion, they will not know what to do with it, and it will feel overwhelming and shaming if you try to come to them. So when you feel a big emotion, don't go towards people. I will say, like our culture, the way that certainly our generation or older, the way that boys have been raised, for example, or were raised, it's changed quite a bit, thankfully, was in this way, where you have a big emotion. The example I just gave, you're not supposed to feel that. That isn't what boys do. That isn't tough. That isn't strong. So what happens? I'm shamed for feeling. The people that love me the most are saying I'm bad when I feel. So guess what occurs? You have a big feeling, you avoid people, and you avoid yourself. So that's the way it all works. Now, if we have more significant trauma, our system's going to say people as a whole aren't safe. And this is my experience. So we have this deep desire internally to connect as a human need met with the push away of connection. And so what we have to do is titrate this, meaning a little bit at a time. And please know to not expect it to feel great at first. Not only just not great for me, when I maybe I went to a poetry writing class because I like poetry, or I went to, I met somebody like a mutual friend, and somebody said, hey, we should get coffee. I would go very dysregulated, slightly dissociated, like not really feeling in my body, really anxious, and not like myself. Why? Because my nervous system was saying people aren't safe. So if I was to expect myself to just feel really good, I'd be waiting forever. I had to show my system again and again, people are safe. It's safe to let yourself near someone. And the more I did it, the more that I could show up and be less dysregulated and less dysregulated until the point that I wasn't dysregulated. And then at that point, still, they didn't feel nurturing yet. It felt like a thing that I did because I was fawning, becoming what I thought they wanted me to be. I wasn't like getting supported. I was supporting. So at least I wasn't dysregulated, but they definitely didn't feel like a place I went to for help or support. And then I started to work on that, and that felt uncomfortable and scary until I was able to actually lean into the reciprocity of relational dynamic of giving and receiving. And then relationships became much more easeful. So I just want to name that's how it goes. That's a part of the process. The more that you heal too, you thaw, like a person said in a question was asked in a previous episode, they've used the word thaw. We begin to thaw. We begin to come back into our embodied experience. And then the tactics that used to work don't anymore. Like if what you used to do to connect was, I just was like the life of the party. And I was always telling jokes, even though I was sad. I was just like the person that everybody was like, oh, they're so full of life. But the more that I became embodied, the truth is that was a mask I was wearing. And now that I'm actually present to my body, I can notice like, ooh, I feel nervous, or I feel excited, or I feel exposed. We definitely feel exposed. And it can prevent us from wanting to connect because now we don't have that film or armor there. And so we have to titrate this. The more we do, the more we find our people, and the more the innate, inherent ability to connect becomes more filled with ease.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful.
Rach, as you've done this work and like the thawing has happened for you or coming back into your own body, have you noticed that it's changed anything or did change anything about how you show up in relationships, or was any part of that in the journey kind of like, maybe uncomfortable is the right word as you transitioned?
Yeah. I remember I would be in really high sympathetic, and so I would probably eat quite a lot as a way to try and like bring some settledness. And so I would notice I would just like order a lot of cake, or like food would be a big part of meeting up with someone. And I really resonated with what you said, where you put on a mask. Like I would always be the happy, lively one, the one everyone wanted to ask questions for or gain support from. But if ever I kind of initiated or tried to receive support, it's like those people weren't really there. And so you kind of then realize, oh, I need to show up more as who I am a bit sooner sometimes. Otherwise you end up in a dynamic that then doesn't feel satisfying. And so then that's kind of then the next part of the journey. So yeah, showing up in your sadness sometimes and in your humanity, and not always as like everything's great, even though it's really not, and you're just eating a ton of cake and crisps. And so I have really noticed that. Is it safe to be who I am with you? That's the journey and the process.
Yeah, and that's a really scary, brave thing to do, huh? To say like, is it safe to be myself with you? That means I have to try it out, which is a brave thing. I don't actually know till I try it. And I'm sure you notice this, like some relationships can transition and the person can meet us in that. And then others, they transition out of being close friendship because the other person is not willing or wanting to have that different dynamic. And the only way to know is by doing exactly what you said.
Yeah. And kind of being willing to try with lots of different people. So, and knowing that some will stay and some won't. And it's not a reflection on you. It's meeting those people who are for you and who can join you in the depth of connection and realness that your heart is longing for. Because not everyone wants to do that or is ready to do that. So it can, take a little bit of, exploration.
That's right. Thanks so much for that real life example of what it looks like, Rach. And as always, it's so good to have you here on this episode and so many others. And for everyone listening, thank you for being here with us. As always, we only ever need to know the next right step in our relationships and beyond. Enjoying this episode and want to go even deeper into somatic healing? You can join my email community for weekly teachings, tools, and live events. Click the show notes to join.